The year 2020 was a momentous year for online gaming and particularly gacha gaming, as the eastern part of the world started to introduce the whole world their working online gaming mechanics, the gacha mechanics, with the ever popular Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is an iconic game, with their engaging action combat, a Breath of the Wild style open world, attractive characters, and great story and world building. Whether you personally like Genshin Impact or not, Genshin Impact is a massive hit to the majority of the gaming community. Fast forward to 2023, it is nearly the 3rd anniversary of Genshin Impact. The game is still thriving to this day with their dedicated players. However, I'm gonna be blunt here, I grew out of Genshin Impact and right now, I hate Genshin Impact. Here's the thing about Genshin Impact that irks me and finally pushed me out of the fandom. Playing Genshin Impact is tedious and feels like a chore, with their 4 daily commissions scattered around its huge map every single day, the huge set of requirements to actually progress through most of Genshin's content, and these problems won't be too much of a problem if the story itself isn't problematic. Because the story itself is such a slog. The writing of the story is not streamlined and Paimon is probably the worst part of Genshin Impact. The sheer annoyance of this gremlin and the fact that she basically acts as the main character in all of the dialogues makes the actual main character not really compelling, as you are not exploring the MC story anymore, but rather whatever you are doing within these years of the game's lifetime. I firmly believe that Paimon might be the reason Genshin Impact suffers in the story department. But through all of that, the problem that puts the nail in the coffin is by far the last incident of Dehia's release. Remember that? For those who don't know, Dehia's release was a catastrophe. They've established Dehia as a lovable and compelling character that a lot of people would grow to love throughout the story of Genshin Impact through Sumeru. It's been a long time since the first time she's introduced to the eventual release of the character, and they fumbled with such a horrible gameplay kit design paired with her really low scaling for some reason. In short, Dehia, while being a 5-star, requiring you to potentially pay for the character, is actually worse than any other characters in the game, which makes people think that the game has sullied the character, and in conjunction to that, sullied the player's expectation and opinion for the game. And as you've expected, I am one of those players. I am one of those guys who really didn't care of quote-unquote meta-defining characters. My way of playing Genshin Impact is that I should play who I think I will have fun with. Dehia was one of the first characters in a long time that I liked in the game's story. I even have wailed for her constellations up to C2. However, Dehia in practice isn't really fun to play either. She's clunky, has long cooldown timers, she's just not fun to play. Being a badly designed character that is not really fun to play, while also costs up to $500, it is appalling. And right there, I realize I hate Genshin Impact and I don't want to play Genshin Impact ever again. But well, you can't deny that Genshin Impact has been very successful as a live service online game, whether you'd want to argue that the gacha mechanics is ethical or not. With its success, Hoyoverse one-upped themselves on making more of these gacha games. You might have seen the action hack-and-slash game similar to Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero. One other title in development is Honkai Star Rail, a supposedly sci-fi spin in an alternate universe of Honkai Impact 3rd with a turn-based RPG gameplay. I, as many others, saw the teaser to Honkai Star Rail and thought, yeah, I'll just try this game out and probably not gonna be my main game. For me personally, knowing I had history with Grand Blue Fantasy and many other turn-based RPG games, I definitely have to try this one out. Little did I know, this game is one of my most favorite games released this year to play daily. So what's so good about Honkai Star Rail? Well, for one, and this is a personal taste of mine, I really like the space sci-fi aesthetics. I've had my time praising automation games in a previous video of mine, but I haven't actually mentioned that I have a soft spot for space sci-fi settings and aesthetics. I don't know about you guys, the medieval fantasy setting for a game is great, but they tend to get boring because they have to look somewhat the same every time. For a game to take on the space sci-fi setting makes them have the creative liberty to design anything that they want. For example, Herta Space Station is your typical giant spaceship at first, but Honkai Star Rail isn't only about that space station. There's also a planet that is on the brink of extinction with only one city left, in which they have to resort to an authoritarian government to stay alive. There's also a place equivalent to the Chinese aesthetic in space too, making a great variety of creativity of different feelings and vibes when you're in a different place. And not to mention, the music in these places are really well composed as well. Well, not too much of a banger like a specific RPG franchise, but they are pretty well composed for what it is. These settings and music are not all of it, more are to come as hinted in the game, so I am enthusiastically waiting for what's to come. But rambling about the aesthetics and settings of the game isn't really getting anywhere, because a game isn't a game without its gameplay. Honkai Star Rail is a bog standard turn-based RPG, a 4-man party versus mainly AI enemies. The main difference of gameplay in Honkai Star Rail versus other turn-based RPGs is that Honkai Star Rail only provides 3 active abilities as a package in every character. So one character can have basic attack, skill, and ultimate. It is pretty standard as a turn-based RPG, but as more time is invested into the game, there's a lot of potential to be built on the characters in the form of traces and relics. Traces basically gives you more passive abilities, and relics gives you more stats and more bonuses depending on the relic set. My personal favorite is the Wind Relic because it gives advance forward on ultimate, which means after ultimate, your character can get their turn faster than anyone else. So in short, the turn-based RPG works with a lot of customization, both in character synergy and relic synergy. It is also worth mentioning that it is also a turn-based RPG that utilizes element weakness exploit, kinda like in Persona, but instead of a one more, it breaks the other bar on top of the health bar, and more effects can happen depending on the element, making the game have more approach in combat. I know that the majority of players around the world aren't really fond of the turn-based RPG gameplay. Some might say that this type of gameplay is boring. I can attest to that, because the bare bones of a turn-based RPG tends to be boring. Game developers have to do something to the system to make it either less boring or actually fun. The best example of this is definitely Persona 5. It has a lot of flair, crazy stylish design, and on top of that, music so good that it is one of the most iconic pieces of music in the video game world. While Honkai Star Rail might not be able to compete against Persona 5 as of the current state of the game, Honkai Star Rail had the aesthetics that I've mentioned before, good music, a good enemy design, quite a lot of content at launch too, including Calixtus and the simulated universe, and most importantly, the cool and flashy character animations. And I'd have to say, Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based RPG that focuses on the characters on top of everything. And by that, Honkai Star Rail needed compelling characters. Thankfully, they've exceeded my expectations. The characters and their stories are so good, it might be the selling point of Honkai Star Rails right now. I mean, that's the entire point of the gacha mechanics in the game, but the characters' emotions, banter, and the amount of care being put into the writing of these characters' stories made these characters special. On top of that, these are without the interference of the devil Paimon, so the writing of these characters did not suffer a lot of damage. This is also the first time I really like the main character to the point that I will always use my main character in every battle. This is by far the most enjoyable storytelling and character-driven gacha game I've experienced so far. And to be honest, I am up for the future of this game. Honkai Star Rail has proven with their aesthetics, gameplay, and character design is good enough to the point that investing in this game is so much worth it if you're worried if you should invest your time and money into Honkai Star Rail. I'd have to say, more so than Genshin Impact in my opinion. And to me personally, I will probably be talking a lot about Honkai Star Rail in the future on this YouTube channel. But that being said, I have some worrying thoughts about Honkai Star Rail as of the state of the game right now. Okay, keep in mind that these are my opinions about Honkai Star Rail. I am just another player who enjoyed playing the game. However, as someone who had history in meddling with Grand Blue Fantasy, I have some thoughts that might be worrying for Honkai Star Rail's future. First and foremost, being somewhat of a spin-off to Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail undoubtedly had some Genshin Impact's DNA on it, namely the resin or energy system most commonly utilized in mobile games. The resin system in Genshin is flawed, in which that it doesn't generate enough resin to provide players enough content to actually play the game. Honkai Star Rail has similar system, but it has more maximum capacity and the generation is 6 minutes instead of 8 minutes. I could ramble a lot about the resin system being garbage or anything, but in short, while it seems to be better than Genshin, the gameplay to spend that resin is more streamlined to the point that you will feel the drought of game content at Honkai Star Rail's endgame faster than Genshin Impact. I am hoping that the resin system or the Trailblaze power system will be better in future updates, but the current system doesn't seem too good. Second, and my very concerning thing about Honkai Star Rail is that I'm afraid that Honkai Star Rail will devolve into a power creep gacha fest, just like what happened in Grand Blue Fantasy. So let me explain what happened in Grand Blue Fantasy. Grand Blue Fantasy is also a turn-based RPG, focusing on the capabilities of characters and in conjunction, their weapons as well. But let's not jump into the rabbit hole that is the weapon grid here. While it has a lot of problems on its own, the character have a set of problems as well. For the longest time, Grand Blue Fantasy has an established set of rarity rules, that being R, SR, and SSR. Normal SSRs at first was passable on the early levels. However, as more time was invested, you'd realize that normal SSRs will never cut it, because limited SSRs exist, and they are far stronger than normal SSRs. That could have been another new rarity above SSR. Other than that, Grand Blue Fantasy is probably the game that popularized the multiple version of one character, making every previous characters obsolete because the newer version should be better to catch up to their meta, hence the power creep. Basically, Grand Blue Fantasy is so deep into power creep that the gacha pool is cluttered with useless SSRs and duplicate characters that can't even be in one team. Now, Honkai Star Rail is fresh. It was just released without any clue what they're going to do with the power level of the game. With the inkling of Genshin's gacha system, they will probably have a lot of limited characters while only have 5 to 7 standard SSR characters. My hope with this video is that Honkai Star Rail should at least not do any alternate version of the same character to counter the possibility of power creep. And while we're at it, I do not want another Dahlia situation in Honkai Star Rail, where a character is so weak that it drops my or other players' will to play the game anymore. So basically, don't release characters that are too weak or way too strong. Keep them at an even level playing field for all of them. But alas, as of now, I am having so much fun playing Honkai Star Rail. I am anticipating for the game's future as more contents get released, and you might see a lot more Honkai Star Rail in this YouTube channel. And you know, this might be your type of game as well. I highly recommend you to try the game out for yourself, because Honkai Star Rail is my gacha game of the year.